So here you are, and you have decided on raised beds for your garden, but now you got to fill them. Well, in today's video, I'm going to share 5 potentially free sources of material to fill your raised beds with. Stay tuned, that's coming up next. There are a whole pile of reasons to consider raised beds as a good option for your garden. They offer a potential solution to poor soil situations, massive weed infestations like we had in our farm garden area, and a whole host of other potential garden problems. Plus, when built and arranged right, they look amazing too. But depending upon how deep your beds are, filling them can be no small task, and it might cost a fortune if you try to fill them with bagged raised bed mix from a big box store. Hi, my name is Zach, and I want to welcome you to KT Outdoors, where we share content that helps you build local, healthy food resources by feeding the soil that feeds your body and your soul, all while saving you and your family money while increasing your food security. When it comes time to begin filling our new raised beds last seasons, I looked around and got resourceful. Allow me to share with you now the top 5 things to fill at least the majority of my raised beds with that I found last year. Let me begin by stating that what I am about to propose are resources for filling the bottom layers of your bed. If your beds are 12 inches high or taller, you don't need to fill the entire bed with completely epic, lush, raised bed soils. Anyone who tells you otherwise is probably trying to sell you something to fill your raised beds with. As long as the lower layers are organic, things should work out just fine. If you've ever researched the Lasagna garden method, then this will all sound very familiar to you. If those layers have some sort of a water holding capacity, then that's all of the better. And these are not the only items that'll work. These are just my 5 favorites because I have ready access to them here locally. So coming in at number 5 on our list is good old-fashioned yard and garden waste. Depending upon your timeline and when you build your beds, you might find all sorts of things around to add to your beds. Pretty much anything you would put in a compost pile is fair game for the bottom layers of a new raised bed. Ideas might include leaves and grass clippings, weeds, sod that you have removed from areas. I'd put it face down if I were going to use that, and maybe even rocks. Porous rocks in particular will add minerals to your soil and provide habitat for worms and other microorganisms. Regular old dirt or topsoil, even the dirt from your chicken run, could work and will add microorganism populations to your bed. Don't overlook kitchen scraps either. Remember, if it could have gotten in a compost pile, it can go in the lower layers of your raised bed. Next on the list of recommendations is loose hay and or straw. Now, some of you might be questioning these being grouped together, but it is not without intention. I have ready access to both of these items at my in-laws farm, and I find all that I need for a host of garden projects laying on the ground under the stacks, which means I am literally using the waste products that would just blow away in the wind once the stacks are moved. I use these 2 items in tandem as bedding for my chicken coops quite often, which means when I collect them, I have straw, hay straw, and chicken manure all mixed together with any spilled feed and dirt that might be scratched up by the hens. So I don't hesitate to add a layer of this material to my beds. I know it's just going to compost in place throughout the growing season and add fertility to my beds. Plus, it's bulky too, which saves me on cost, at least in the initial season. Another item you can often find for free or very affordable is aged or dried manure. Many feedlot operations have manure piles from cleaning out their pens. If you know the right people, this resource can often be found in huge quantities. While you might not want to grow directly in it, especially if it hasn't been aged, it will make a fine layer deeper in your beds. I would also venture to say that horse manure, which is prone to being full of weed seeds, would be an alright addition to the lower layers of your bed. When the seeds are buried deeply, they don't have a chance to sprout due to the lack of light from the deep soil layers above them. Any manure from any herbivore will likely be fine here. So goat, cow, sheep, horse, llama, rabbit, you name it, it doesn't matter. Go ahead and put it in the lower layers of your beds. It will just add fertility and help fill those babies up. My second favorite resource, if you can find it, is silage top. Now, you'll need to know a farmer in order to source this, but my father-in-law taught me years ago about the amazing fertility present in silage top. Silage is an animal feed product. It is made by green chopping whole stalks of corn and piling them in huge piles and then packing them with a tractor or a heavy loader. The resulting mountain of shredded corn, and trust me, if you've never seen one, it is literally a mountain, will develop a crust on the outer layer as it ages. This crust isn't eaten by the cattle or whatever else they're feeding it to, and is known as silage top. It is bulky, full of fungal activity from the fermenting process that goes on in the pile, and generally a good filler when used in moderation. Now, moderation is key with this because it is so nutrient dense. My father-in-law warned me that if you use too much of it, your plants might just completely burn up. So go light with it, but it's a good resource. I like to use it in conjunction with our last recommendation so that its extra fertility can be soaked up. Which brings us to my number one favorite thing for filling your raised beds, and that is old branches and logs. I have read about many people employing this method as it relates to a permaculture practice known as Hugelkultur. This technique involves mounding garden beds on top of woody material. The result is some decaying woody matter at the base of the beds, which ends up being full of fungal activity and acts like a sponge for holding water. Logs in particular are also very bulky and take up space in your beds, which reduces the need for other more expensive ingredients. That's a win-win. So, when we filled our raised beds, for example, I generally started with a layer of hay and straw and or some silage top. I topped this first layer with as much woody material as I could find, old logs and branches, cut pieces of 2x4, etc. If I had had it, I wouldn't have hesitated to add wood chips or sawdust here as well. On top of this woody layer, I added more hay and straw along with some manure and topsoil. I personally like to use the soil in my chicken run as it always seems to be building up and is full of nutrients from the normal chicken activity. You know, chickens poop. Poop is fertilizer. That's a good thing. On top of this, I might add a nice layer of my bonus tip item, which is rough, unsifted compost. This layer will inoculate the whole bed as the water from the above filters down into the beds. My piles are also generally full of red wiggler composting worms, so adding this layer of rough compost puts a starter population of them into the beds. Now the beds are ready for a final thick layer of your preferred raised bed soil. You can purchase raised bed soil if you want, but I like to mix compost with either peat moss or cocoa coir and some vermiculite. To this I will add azomite and green sand for minerals, as well as some form of a slow release organic fertilizer, preferably with some kelp or other seaweed based fertility source. We'll get more into the specifics of this mixture in our next video, so stay tuned for that. As you can see, the general idea here is to save money by filling the bottom 2/3 or more of your beds with bulky organic material, so you can focus your resources on the top 8 to 10 inches of your bed, which is where most of your plants will find the resources they need to grow. Please do be advised that as the season wears on, the composting process that will inevitably happen with all of these layers means that they're going to settle to some degree. I personally see this as a good thing because it means I get to add another nice layer of fresh soil mixture full of unused fertility for the next growing season. But it also means that the age-old trick of burying your tomato plants really deep in the soil is not advised, at least in the first year, as it might be too hot down below for the first few weeks or so after you fill your beds in the way that I'm proposing. Yeah, ask me how I know that one. I may have almost killed what ended up being my favorite tomato plant last summer by planting it too deep. You should have felt how hot the soil was down in those deeper layers of my bed. But as soon as I pulled the root ball up closer to the surface and got it away from all that warm composting material, all was well, and she took off and produced like a rock star. So, you've been warned. Your beds will be composting if you fill them as I am describing here. So the lower layers of your bed will be very warm and be generating some heat. If you do this early enough in the season, that can be an added bonus because it means that your soil will be warm well in advance of warmer growing weather. So it's a potential way to start your growing season off early since you're hopefully watching this well ahead of the growing season. I hope this short video gives you some ideas for getting your raised beds filled and ready for the growing season. I was so happy with how things went with our raised beds last season, and I can't wait to get back out there when the weather breaks, get them topped up with some fresh soil, and drop my seedlings into their happy new home, because life is better when it's lived outdoors. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.